Well, hello, compressed air friends. Today we're going to talk about something very near and dear to my heart that I have found out over the years is actually kind of a controversial subject. And that is the subject of how to properly change the separator element. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, I know how to change the separator element, Rob. You disconnect all the stuff from the top of the sump tank, you pull the lid, you drop the new element in, you're good to go. However, I have found over the years there are some nuances that get missed even by the most experienced technicians. And so as you can see from my from my pig mat farm here, one of the first things you must do when you get this separator lid off is you need to get all the oil out of here. And the best way to do that is to simply soak it up with some pig mat like so. Other thing, obviously, you want to make sure your gasket, your mating surfaces are all clean and everything. But then the other thing you should do is you should consult the manual for the machine you are working on to see what the OEM recommends for a procedure. Now, it's nice and easy on the newer Sullys because there's a QR code right on the machine you can scan, and it'll take you right to the proper manual for this machine. Now, on our Solaire here, for example, you will notice we have right here in bold, always replace the lock washers. So, if you put a new separator element in this machine and you do not replace the lock washers, you have serviced this machine not in accordance with the OEM recommendations, and therefore you have done it wrong. Yes, I said it. You're doing it wrong. Other pretty standard stuff from there. Remove the elements, scrape the old gasket off. Of course, you don't want to let any scraps fall in the tank. Inspect for rust, blah, blah, blah. Do not remove the staples from the separator element. We all know that's a bad thing. However, so many of us are still living under the lie that those staples are there in the gasket to ground the element. They are not. Staples are there to bond the element, tank, and lid. Bonding is not grounding. It is different. So, I've covered that before. Do not use any gasket eliminator. Of course, we know why, because it can interfere with the staples. And again, always use new lock washers. Torque to 140 foot-pounds. Every good manual is going to give you a sump lid torque. You should be sure to follow it. Reason being is, on this particular machine, if you torque that lid to 140 foot-pounds with new lock washers, you will not have to do this. The whole reason that this leaks and we get oil trapped in these screw hole or in these bolt holes here is because this was not torqued down properly before. It was either over torqued and the gasket swished and a little bit of oil got out onto here, or it was under torqued and of course we had some bleed over that way. The reason why it is so important to get this oil out of here is this torque spec is a dry thread torque spec. 140 foot-pounds with lubricated threads versus 140 foot-pounds with dry threads are two completely different torque specifications. So we have to make sure we get all the oil out of here, and we have to make sure that all of our bolts are nice and clean. These are actually stained. I should get new bolts. Maybe next time I service this thing I will, but these are actually stained from anti-seize, which I was able to get most of it out of there, but yeah, that's the other thing, man. Anti-seize is completely unnecessary. People always say, well, what if the customer doesn't service it and then the separator element seizes into place? Well, then your customer is going to pay you extra money to stand there and chisel that separator out because they failed to service their machine properly. That's what happens. And then maybe they learn their lesson, maybe they don't. Either way, it's completely unnecessary and a lot of times detrimental. With the exception of, I think there's some Gardner Denver machines that actually recommend it. Other than that, I can't think of any off the top of my head that actually recommend it. I actually know a few manufacturers that say do not use it. So Anyway, now if we look at our instructions here, down here to step 9, where it says verify continuity between the separator element and the separator sump tank. And once I get this guy put back together and torqued down, I'll check back in and I will show you guys the best way to do that. And it is, I mean, it is a critical step in this process that gets overlooked probably more often than not. So let me get my new element in, let me get my lid torqued down, and then I'll show you guys how to check that continuity and make sure that your lid, element, and tank are bonded, not grounded, bonded. All right, and we'll talk a little bit about some implications of what happens when this is not bonded properly. So I shall be back in just a few. See ya. So all right, friends, when it comes to checking continuity on your new separator element, some manufacturers, there's sometimes a hole on the side of the sump tank you can pop out, and you can check resistance against the element that way. Most newer machines, newer Solaires in general, they do not give you that. And so kind of the universal check is this hole right here where your oil scavenger line was. Get yourself a piece of either like 10 or 12 gauge solid insulated wire, and you're going to strip one end of it. Actually, you're going to strip both ends of it, but one end of it we're going to feed right down this hole until we know that we are bottomed out against the inside of the separator element. Then all we are going to do, we're going to set our meter for ohms. We're going to clip onto the other end of our wire, and then with our other lead, so we're going to make sure we're good and bottomed out here, and then we can either find a bare spot or scrape some paint or something. I don't know how well that reading's showing up, but it's about 1.4 ohms to the lid, 1.3, 1.2. And then we're going to come down here to the tank. We're going to scrape a little paint, and we've got a reading of about 0.6. Scrape a little paint up here. Yeah, 0.9, 0.8. It's bouncing a little bit, but so what that's telling us is that the lid, the element, and the tank are all, I guess the correct term would be equipotent. They are all of equal potential. There's not going to be any static electricity developing between these elements, because what can happen is, if for whatever reason you remove the staples, lid's not torqued properly, whatever, if for whatever reason there is no continuity between the lid and the tank, then you can end up with static electricity, and you get lightning bolts that shoot across the inside of the sump lid. And if you've ever taken a sump lid off and you've seen streaks across the inside that look like lightning bolts, like what the hell was that? Well, that was from not having good continuity. Your tank, element, and lid were not bonded. So the ramifications of that being, yes, those lightning bolts can ignite the oil vapor inside the sump and cause a gigantic explosion. You may be asking, Rob, have you ever seen this? Yes, I have. Well, I didn't get to see it actually happen. I was the poor slob that had to go investigate after it happened. But it was a large machine. It's 300 or so horsepower machine, and the facility maintenance guys were doing their own maintenance on the machines, which good on them for actually changing separator elements and things like they're supposed to. But this guy did not understand what those elements were, or what the staples were in those elements. So he was removing the staples for one, and then he was using blue RTV on the gasket, and had been doing it that way for quite some time. And eventually it just, you know, his luck ran out, I guess, and it ended up blowing that whole compressor room pretty sky high. So wasn't a fun conversation to have with the mechanic and with his supervisor, that, hey, this is due to improper service, but you know, it is what it is. But that's the catastrophic end of things. And like I said, I've only ever seen that one time. Normally what you will see is, you will see premature minimum pressure check valve failure, and when they do fail, you will notice all the parts inside of the minimum pressure check valve, they melt. And that's a pretty sure symptom that you did not have good continuity here, and you had the lightning bolts going across the lid, and it melted the minimum pressure check valve. So that's why that's so important to make sure that that continuity is there. Don't skip that step. And I actually document it on my work orders. I document the sump lid torque, and I document my ohm readings to the separator, just for the simple fact that if something were to ever happen, you know, it can't come back to improper service techniques, because it was done according to the OEM's manual, and that's all recorded on the service order. Many of you may not know this, but service orders are not just a pain in your ass to do after the job is done. If you ever find yourself in a situation where there's a lawsuit involved, and your customer is alleging improper service or negligence or anything like that, that service order actually becomes a legal document, and anything that is in it or not in it can and will be used against you. So you know, you don't have to go into painstaking detail, you know, turned each bolt to the left 18 times to disengage, you know, I mean, that level of detail is just silly, but they should be detailed. And if you're changing separator elements, they most certainly should have sump lid torque, and it should be noted that that is per the manufacturer's instructions, and you should be checking continuity between your lid, element, and tank, and those should be documented as well. Just because if for no other reason, it covers you, and helps to shield you from any allegations of wrongdoing, should those allegations come up. So but yeah, like I said, I found this subject to be kind of controversial especially amongst the older techs. They're like, I just run them down with a fucking impact, been doing it that way for years. Well, okay, as I've said before, you can be a dumbass for a very long time. It's just a fact of life. So yeah, if you're smart, make sure you're following those guidelines, follow what the OEM says. It covers you, it covers your customer, it's better for everybody. I know it's fun to think you know better, and I just hammer them down with a fucking impact, who cares? But you know, if it ever came down to it, you know, that can bite you. So that's what I got today. Peace out. Stay safe out there. Oh wait, I did that wrong. Be safe out there. Ooh, cracked a little bit. All right, see you guys.